The morning of December 23, 1941, brought more than defeat to Wake Island. It brought revelation. As Japanese forces overwhelmed the tiny coral atoll in the Central Pacific, 1,603 Americans found themselves prisoners of war. Among them were 1,150 civilian contractors from the Morrison-Knudsen Company, men who had been building an airfield and naval facilities on what was supposed to be America's forward guardian in the Pacific. These were the same hands that had raised Boulder Dam, carved highways through mountain passes, and lifted New York's skyscrapers toward the clouds. Now they stood on foreign sand with their tools silenced, facing an enemy that international law said they could not fight. The legal reality was stark and unforgiving. Under the Geneva Conventions, civilians captured in war zones faced summary execution if they resisted enemy military action. Resistance branded them guerrillas, stripping away any protection the laws of war might offer. The Japanese understood this distinction perfectly. On October 7, 1943, 98 of those Wake Island contractors would be lined up along a ditch facing the sea, blindfolded with hands and feet bound, then mowed down by Japanese machine gun and rifle fire in what became known as the Wake Island Massacre. One man escaped during the chaos, only to be recaptured 3 weeks later and personally beheaded by Admiral Shigematsu Sakaibara, the island's commanding officer. But Wake Island's greatest tragedy would birth America's most innovative military force. In Washington, D.C., Rear Admiral Ben Morrell, chief of the Bureau of Yards and Docks, studied the reports from the Pacific with growing certainty. The age of civilian contractors in combat zones had ended before it truly began. What the Navy needed was something unprecedented in military history. Construction workers who could build anything, anywhere, under any conditions, and defend what they built with rifle and bayonet if necessary. On December 28, 1941, just 5 days after Wake Island's fall, Admiral Morrell submitted his request to the Bureau of Navigation. He wanted authority to create naval construction battalions, military units recruited from America's construction trades and trained by the Marine Corps in ground combat. The concept was radical, almost contradictory. These would be sailors who drove bulldozers and mixed concrete, engineers who could operate under artillery fire, builders who carried both hammers and rifles. Authorization came on January 5, 1942. Within 12 days, the 1st Naval Construction Detachment, 296 men strong, embarked from Davisville, Rhode Island, bound for Bora Bora in French Polynesia. They sailed before they had a name, before they had uniforms that properly fit their dual nature, before anyone truly understood what they would become. On March 5, 1942, the Navy Department officially designated them Seabees, a phonetic rendering of the construction battalion abbreviation Seabee. Admiral Morrell personally furnished their motto, Construmus Bituimus, we build, we fight. The men who answered this call were unlike any military force ever assembled. They averaged 37 years old, nearly a decade older than typical military recruits. The Navy had waived the standard age limit to 50, and several men past 60 managed to slip through the screening process. These were not fresh-faced boys learning trades in military training camps. They were master craftsmen, veteran electricians, seasoned heavy equipment operators, skilled carpenters who had learned their professions during the Great Depression's work programs. They knew more than 60 different trades, and many could perform several with equal skill. The Seabee recruiting stations sought out the men who had helped build America's greatest engineering achievements. They found workers from the Boulder Dam project, where they had learned to move mountains of stone and pour concrete under impossible conditions. They recruited from the National Highway System, men who understood how to cut roads through hostile terrain. They pulled from the crews who had raised New York's Art Deco monuments, skilled in working at dangerous heights under tight deadlines. These were men who had faced the challenge of the Bonneville Dam and Grand Coulee Dam, who understood that the impossible simply required more time and ingenuity. At naval construction training centers established at Davisville, Rhode Island, and later at Camp Peary in Virginia, these civilian masters learned to be Marines. They studied military discipline alongside advanced construction techniques. They learned to operate the M1 Garand rifle with the same precision they applied to surveying instruments. They mastered the art of defensive positions while perfecting their skills with dynamite and heavy machinery. Most importantly, They learned that construction in combat zones required a completely different mindset than peacetime building. Camp Endicott at Davisville grew to accommodate 350 officers and 15,000 men by June 1942, featuring roughly 45 vocational schools teaching everything from arc welding to diesel engine repair. The curriculum included specialized courses in air compressors, bridge building, bulldozer operation, camouflage, concrete work, dynamite and demolition, diesel engines, distillation and water purification, dock building, drilling, first aid, firefighting, generators, ice making, refrigeration, road building, and dozens of other essential skills. By November 1942, Camp Peary near Williamsburg, Virginia, expanded the program with capacity for 50,000 men. The first real test of Admiral Morill's vision came in the Solomon Islands, where the 6th Naval Construction Battalion would earn its place in military history. The Marines had captured Henderson Field on Guadalcanal on August 9, 1942, seizing the nearly completed Japanese airstrip that would become the focal point of 6 months of savage fighting. But capturing an airfield and keeping it operational under constant enemy bombardment were entirely different challenges. On September 1, 1942, the first contingent of the 6th Construction Battalion, 387 men and 5 officers selected primarily from Companies A and D, landed on Guadalcanal. They immediately dug foxholes in a narrow strip of coconut grove adjoining Henderson Field, then went to work the next morning on what would become one of the war's most dangerous construction projects. The Japanese had left them a runway 3,800 feet long by 150 feet wide, with 150-foot clearance zones on either side. It needed constant repair, improvement, and expansion under conditions no construction crew had ever faced. The Japanese made keeping Henderson Field operational a relentless nightmare. They bombed the airstrip as fast as the Seabees could repair it, turning construction into a deadly race against time. During the intense bombing raids, American fighters had to circle overhead, while Seabees worked frantically below to fill craters and repair damage. The men of the 6th Construction Battalion developed techniques that would be studied by military engineers for decades afterward. They discovered that 100 Seabees could repair the damage from a 500-pound bomb hit on an airstrip in 40 minutes, working under fire with equipment that had to be constantly moved to avoid becoming targets. During one particular hour on October 14, 1942, 13 bomb craters pockmarked Henderson Field while American aircraft circled above waiting to land, their fuel gauges dropping toward empty. The Seabees filled every crater within 60 minutes, allowing the fighters to touch down safely. This wasn't construction. It was battlefield medicine applied to concrete and steel, performed by men who understood that every minute of delay could cost American pilots their lives. Seaman Second Class Lawrence C. Bucky Meyer of the 6th Construction Battalion embodied the fighting spirit that would define the Seabees. During his off-duty hours, Meyer salvaged and repaired an abandoned machine gun, teaching himself to operate the weapon through trial and error. On October 3, 1942, when a Japanese Zero fighter made a low strafing run across Henderson Field, Meyer used his salvaged machine gun to shoot down the enemy aircraft. The Silver Star citation would note his exceptional courage and initiative, but it was awarded posthumously. 13 days after his aerial victory, Meyer was killed when Japanese naval gunfire struck the gasoline barge where he was working. The 6th Construction Battalion's achievements under fire caught the attention of the Marine Corps leadership, who had initially been skeptical of these older, hybrid sailor soldiers. Marine reports to the commandant were so positive that the Corps requested construction battalions be permanently assigned to Marine operations. The Marines discovered that Seabees brought capabilities no traditional military unit could provide. They could repair battle damage faster than anyone imagined possible, construct defensive positions using advanced engineering principles, and adapt civilian construction techniques to military needs. Meanwhile, in the Treasury Islands campaign of November 1943, another Seabee would create the most iconic image of the fighting builder. Machinist's mate Second Class Aurelio Tassone of the 87th Naval Construction Battalion was driving his bulldozer ashore to commence construction work when Lieutenant Charles E. Turnbull told him that a Japanese pillbox was holding up the advance of New Zealand forces from the beach. The concrete and log bunker had pinned down the assault troops with machine gun fire, and conventional infantry attacks had failed to neutralize the position. Tasson had named his 24-ton D8 bulldozer Helen, after his wife. Without hesitation, he raised the dozer blade to serve as armor plating and drove straight toward the enemy position. Lieutenant Turnbull followed on foot, providing covering fire with his carbine. Under continuous heavy fire from the Japanese defenders, Tasson maneuvered his massive machine to the pillbox entrance, lowered the blade, and bulldozed the entire structure, crushing all 12 occupants under tons of earth, logs, and concrete. Both men received the Silver Star for this action, and Tasson was promoted to machinist's mate first class. The image of a Seabee using construction equipment as a weapon of war captured American imagination. Hollywood would immortalize the scene in the 1944 film The Fighting Seabees, with John Wayne reenacting Tasson's heroics, but the reality was even more dramatic than the movie version. Marine and Army commanders began requesting Seabee bulldozer operators specifically for combat operations, recognizing that these skilled equipment operators could accomplish in hours what infantry companies might struggle to achieve in days. The success at Treasury Island reflected a broader transformation taking place across the Pacific. The Seabees were developing innovations that would revolutionize amphibious warfare. At their advanced base construction depots, they perfected the pontoon systems that would become crucial to Allied victory. The Magic Box system, developed by Captain John Leacock, consisted of standardized floating steel structures that could be rapidly assembled into causeways, piers, bridges, floating dry docks, or specialized landing craft. These pontoons allowed Allied forces to overwhelm enemy beach defenses with unprecedented speed and flexibility. The pontoon system would face its greatest test during Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy. The Seabees were among the first Americans to hit the beaches on June 6, 1944, working with U.S. Army engineers under heavy German fire to destroy the intricate network of steel and concrete obstacles that Field Marshal Rommel had constructed from the beaches to well offshore. Despite taking heavy casualties in the initial assault, Seabee demolition teams set their explosive charges on schedule and blew huge gaps in the German defensive barriers. Through these breaches, 10,000 Seabees employed their pontoon systems to enable Allied troops and tanks to get ashore and establish the foothold that would lead to Hitler's defeat. Their next task was even more ambitious, constructing artificial harbors using prefabricated components shipped from England. The Mulberry Harbors, as they were code-named, consisted of massive concrete caissons called phoenixes, each 200 feet long, 60 feet wide, and 60 feet high, weighing up to 6,000 tons. Seabee crews rowed the Mulberry components across the English Channel and operated the complex systems needed to sink the caissons in precise positions off Omaha Beach and Gold Beach. Each completed Mulberry Harbor was capable of moving 7,000 tons of vehicles and supplies per day from ship to shore, equivalent to a major peacetime port facility. The British Mulberry at Gold Beach remained operational throughout the winter, ultimately funneling over 2 million soldiers, 4 million tons of supplies, and 500,000 vehicles onto French soil. German Armaments Minister Albert Speer would later acknowledge the devastating effectiveness of the Seabee innovation. After the war, he observed, "To construct our defenses we had in 2 years used some 13 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.5 million tons of steel." A fortnight after the Normandy landings, this costly effort was brought to nothing because of an idea of simple genius. As we now know, the invasion force brought their own harbors. While the Atlantic Theater showcased Seabee engineering brilliance, the Pacific War demonstrated their combat capabilities. 80% of the naval construction force concentrated on the 3 Pacific roads to victory, literally building and fighting their way across thousands of miles of ocean. They constructed over 300 bases on as many islands, building everything from massive bomber strips capable of launching B-29 superfortresses to tiny advanced fueling stations for PT boats operating behind enemy lines. The statistics of Pacific Seabee achievements read like an impossible fantasy. In the North, Central, South, and Southwest Pacific areas, they built 111 major airstrips, 441 piers, 2,558 ammunition magazines, 700 square blocks of warehouses, hospitals designed to serve 70,000 patients, tanks for storing 100 million gallons of gasoline, and housing for 1.5 million men. They served on 4 continents and on more than 300 islands. often landing with the first assault waves and beginning construction while battles still raged around them. But perhaps the most revolutionary Seabee contribution to Pacific victory came from their workshops at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, where a top-secret unit called the Flamethrower Group developed the war's most feared weapon. Colonel Unmacked of the U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service had assembled a small team including 25 men from the 117th Construction Battalion to create mechanized flame-throwing tanks. The project combined the best features of 3 different flame units: the Canadian Ronson, the Navy Model I, and the Navy Mk1. Electricians mate 2nd Class A.A. Reich and electricians mate 2nd Class Joseph Kissel designed the Seabee H-1 flamethrower system, which required 150 pounds of welding rod and 1,100 electrical connections per tank. Each conversion cost between $20,000 and $25,000, equivalent to nearly $300,000 in today's currency. The Seabee H-1 operated at 300 pounds per square inch pressure, giving it a range of 400 feet and the ability to traverse 270 degrees. The system could traverse terrain that conventional weapons could not reach, bringing fire to reverse slopes, deep caves, and fortified positions that had proven impregnable to conventional assault. The first 24 flame-throwing tanks proved devastatingly effective when the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions deployed them at Saipan. Marines and infantry commanders discovered that whenever conventional attacks stalled, flame-throwing tanks could break the deadlock. At one critical engagement, 200 Japanese soldiers were trapped in a cave with 2 openings. Machine guns covered one entrance while a flame-throwing tank, protected by medium tanks, approached the other opening and fired a sustained burst of flame into the cave, eliminating the entire enemy force. Japanese forces quickly learned to fear the distinctive silhouette of the flame tanks. They referred to them as M1 tanks, possibly due to poor translation, and developed specific tactics to counter them. But the psychological impact proved as important as their tactical effectiveness. An electrician's mate who operated a flame-thrower tank wrote from Iwo Jima, "One day we were assigned a pocket to burn out. We did in 6 hours with 4 loads of fuel what a tank battalion and 3 infantry companies had been trying to do for 5 days. The infantry would sooner see 1 flame-thrower tank than a dozen with 75mm guns. The tank-mounted flamethrowers reached their peak effectiveness during the Battle of Iwo Jima, where Marines came to depend on them so completely that they would halt attacks to wait for flame tank support." The commander of the 5th Marine Division stated, "Events proved that the flamethrower tank was the most important single weapon available to this division. 2 Seabees from the 117th Construction Battalion, electricians mate 2nd Class Kissel and ship's fitter 1st Class J.T. Patterson, accompanied the tanks to Iwo Jima to provide technical maintenance during the battle. Iwo Jima represented both the pinnacle of Seabee achievement and their greatest sacrifice. The 133rd Naval Construction Battalion, landing with the 4th Marine Division on February 19, 1945, suffered 328 casualties out of 1,100 men, including 42 killed and 2 missing. This was the highest casualty rate in Seabee history, reflecting the intensity of Japanese resistance and the Seabees' frontline role in the assault. Many of these men were killed on the first day as they attempted to clear beaches and establish construction sites under intense mortar and artillery fire. The 31st Naval Construction Battalion, landing with the 5th Marine Division, faced the challenge of building the road to the summit of Mount Suribachi under constant enemy observation and fire. Japanese defenders had fortified every approach to the 556-foot volcanic peak, making road construction a deadly engineering puzzle. The Seabees had to design a route that provided cover from enemy fire while maintaining grades that vehicles could negotiate. The resulting road was 5,000 feet long, climbing 400 feet in elevation through terrain so difficult that Seabee Jack Cornwell reported his motorcycle required lowest gear both ascending and descending. Construction of the Suribachi Road served a crucial tactical purpose beyond simply reaching the summit. The road allowed American forces to position artillery spotters, flash ranging equipment, and echo apparatus at the peak, dramatically improving the accuracy of U.S. naval and artillery fire. Japanese gun positions that revealed themselves by firing could be taken under precise counter-battery fire within minutes. Much of the Marines' eventual success in neutralizing Japanese artillery positions can be attributed to the intelligence provided by observers positioned on Mount Suribachi. Simultaneously, other Seabee units worked to extend and repair Iwo Jima's airfields under combat conditions. A Caterpillar D7 bulldozer scarified the existing runway surface, turning up mines, unexploded ordnance, and large pieces of shrapnel. Demolition squads followed closely behind, disposing of dangerous objects before road graders could level the surface. Local quarries provided sand-clay fill that greatly facilitated road construction, but every cubic yard had to be won under Japanese fire. The human cost of construction under fire extended far beyond battle casualties. More than 500 Seabees died in accidents during World War II, reflecting the inherently dangerous nature of construction work under combat conditions. Working with heavy machinery, high explosives, and complex engineering projects while under enemy fire created risks that no civilian construction project had ever faced. Yet the Seabees developed safety procedures and innovative techniques that allowed them to complete massive projects while minimizing preventable casualties. Perhaps the most emotionally wrenching Seabee story came not during combat, but in the war's immediate aftermath. At Espiritu Santo in the New Hebrides, the site of one of the largest American bases in the Pacific, the end of hostilities created an unprecedented logistical nightmare. The base had processed 500,000 soldiers and accumulated vast stockpiles of equipment, vehicles, and supplies intended for the invasion of Japan that never came. The Seabees built a ramp running into the sea and began one of the most heartbreaking operations in military history. Every day, American soldiers drove trucks, jeeps, bulldozers, ambulances, and tractors into the channel, locking the wheels and jumping clear at the last second before the vehicles plunged into deep water. Engine blocks cracked and hissed as hot metal met seawater. Steam rose from the waves as millions of dollars worth of equipment disappeared beneath the surface. Travel writer Thurston Clarke would later describe the scene. Some Seabees wept, and I Vanuatu witnessing the destruction of wealth their island would never see again, at least in their lifetimes, thought the Americans had gone mad. The local inhabitants watched in bewilderment as the same Americans who had brought unprecedented prosperity to their islands now systematically destroyed more wealth than most nations possessed. Today, the site is known as Million Dollar Point, a popular diving destination where visitors can explore the underwater graveyard of American military might. The waste at Million Dollar Point reflected broader economic and political realities. The enormous quantity of surplus equipment presented major logistical challenges. Shipping costs to return materials to the United States often exceeded their value. For years in tropical conditions had deteriorated much of the material. Political agreements with colonial governments complicated attempts to transfer useful items to local populations. The paradox of American industrial capacity meant that new production often cost less than salvaging and refurbishing wartime surplus. Yet even as they participated in the destruction at Million Dollar Point, many Seabees recognized they were witnessing the end of an extraordinary chapter in American military history. More than 325,000 men had served in naval construction battalions during World War II, the largest number in Seabee history. They had literally built the infrastructure that enabled Allied victory, constructing over 400 advanced bases along 5 routes to victory that began in the continental United States and ended in the defeated capitals of Germany and Japan. The human stories behind these statistics revealed the true character of the Seabee achievement. At the USS Enterprise, after the Battle of Santa Cruz left the carrier severely damaged, 75 Seabees from Company B of the 3rd Construction Battalion worked round the clock under the ship's damage control officer while Enterprise remained underway with orders to engage the enemy. The emergency repairs they completed allowed Enterprise to participate in the naval battle of Guadalcanal, where her aircraft helped sink 16 Japanese ships and damage 8 others, including the battleship High. Captain Osborne Bennett Hardison, Enterprise's commanding officer, reported to the Navy Department. The emergency repairs accomplished by this skillful, well-trained, and enthusiastically energetic force have placed this vessel in condition for further action against the enemy. Vice Admiral William Halsey personally commended the Seabee detachment. Your commander wishes to express to you and the men of the construction battalion serving under you his appreciation for the services rendered by you in effecting emergency repairs during action against the enemy. The repairs were completed by these men with speed and efficiency. The Enterprise repairs exemplified Seabee ingenuity under pressure. Working with limited materials while the ship maneuvered to avoid enemy submarines, the Seabees jury-rigged solutions using whatever was available. They used thin sheets of metal and paper to replace gaskets on equipment, improvised replacement radiators from metal ammunition boxes, and kept captured Japanese trucks operational with creative mechanical solutions. Their unofficial motto proclaimed, "The difficult we do now, the impossible takes a little longer." This innovative spirit extended to major post-war construction projects that demonstrated Seabee capabilities under peacetime conditions. At QB Point in the Philippines, civilian contractors had declared the project impossible after surveying the forbidding Zambales Mountains and impenetrable jungle terrain. When the Navy turned to the Seabees in 1951, they faced challenges that included monkeys, pythons, wild pigs, carabaos, and roving bands of communist hook raiders who pillaged the surrounding region. The Seabees of Naval Mobile Construction Battalions 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13 spent 5 years moving mountains to create Naval Air Station QB Point. They cut a mountain in half to make way for a nearly 2-mile-long runway, filled sections of Subic Bay up to 98 feet deep, excavated 23 million cubic yards of earth, used 1 million pounds of dynamite to quarry 1 million cubic yards of rock, and moved 15 million cubic yards of hydraulic fill. The earth-moving project equaled the construction of the Panama Canal and required 20 million man-hours of labor. More than 1,000 pieces of heavy equipment were shipped to the site during the construction period, along with over 1 million sacks of cement and countless tons of materials transported 7,000 miles from the United States. The completed facility, commissioned on July 25, 1956, included an air station capable of handling the Navy's largest aircraft and an adjacent pier that could dock the service's biggest aircraft carriers. The $100 million project proved invaluable during the Vietnam War and subsequent Pacific operations. Beginning in 1955, Seabees began yearly deployments to Antarctica as participants in Operation Deep Freeze. The first wintering over party included 200 Seabees, who constructed a 6,000-foot ice runway on McMurdo Sound despite a blizzard that once destroyed the entire project. Working in temperatures that dropped to 60 degrees below zero, they developed specialized techniques for construction on permanently frozen ground. They built snow-compacted roads, underground storage facilities, laboratories, living areas, and in 1962, Antarctica's first nuclear power plant at McMurdo Station. The Antarctic operations required innovations in cold weather construction that pushed Seabee ingenuity to new limits. Traditional construction methods failed in the extreme environment, forcing development of specialized techniques for everything from concrete mixing to equipment maintenance. The Seabees learned to work in conditions where exposed metal could cause instant frostbite, where vehicle engines required constant heating to prevent freezing, and where construction schedules depended entirely on brief Antarctic summer seasons. Throughout the Korean War, Vietnam War, and subsequent conflicts, Seabees continued to demonstrate the combat construction capabilities that had proven so crucial in World War II. During the Korean War, they provided pontoon causeways within hours of the Incheon landing, enabling rapid deployment of troops and equipment. In Vietnam, they built airfields, roads, and bridges while under constant threat of enemy attack, often working in small detachments far from major military installations. The legacy of the World War II Seabees extended far beyond their immediate military contributions. They had proven that the traditional distinction between combat and support forces was artificial and limiting. Their combination of technical expertise and fighting capability created a new model for military engineering that influenced armed forces around the world. The concept of military units trained to both build and fight became standard doctrine for major powers confronting global strategic challenges. More than 75 years after their creation, the innovation and sacrifice of the World War II Seabees continues to resonate. In museums at Port Hueneme, California, and other locations, visitors can examine the tools and weapons that these fighting builders used to construct victory. The bulldozer blade that Aurelio Tassone used to crush the Japanese pillbox on Treasury Island sits beside flame-throwing equipment that helped break Japanese resistance on fortified islands. Personal letters home describe the daily reality of construction under fire, while official reports document achievements that seemed impossible to those who had not witnessed Seabee determination firsthand. The men who answered Admiral Morill's call in 1942 transformed American military capability in ways that extended far beyond their immediate wartime achievements. They demonstrated that skilled civilian professionals could be rapidly integrated into military operations without losing their technical expertise. They proved that construction and combat were complementary rather than contradictory activities. They showed that American industrial know-how, properly organized and motivated, could overcome seemingly impossible challenges in the most hostile environments on Earth. Their motto, "We build, we fight," captured a fundamental truth about the nature of modern warfare. Victory belonged not merely to those who could destroy enemy forces, but to those who could construct the infrastructure necessary to project power across vast distances and maintain it under enemy attack. The Seabees built the roads, airfields, ports, and bases that made Allied victory possible. Without their unique combination of construction skill and fighting determination, the rapid defeat of Axis forces would have been impossible. The 98 American contractors who died at Wake Island on October 7, 1943, had given their lives for a principle they never fully understood. Their sacrifice led to the creation of a military force that combined the best of American civilian expertise with the finest traditions of naval service. The naval construction battalions they inspired would continue to serve American interests long after the last shots of World War II fell silent, building bases in Korea, cutting airstrips in Vietnam, constructing research stations in Antarctica, and responding to natural disasters around the world. In the end, the Seabees represented something uniquely American: the belief that any challenge could be overcome through the application of practical skill, innovative thinking, and sheer determination. They took the tools of peaceful construction and transformed them into instruments of liberation. They proved that bulldozers could be weapons of war, that concrete mixers could be as important as artillery pieces, and that the men who built America's infrastructure could also build the foundations of global freedom. Their story continues wherever American forces face the challenge of construction under dangerous conditions. From Iraq and Afghanistan to disaster relief operations around the world, the descendants of those original fighting Seabees carry forward the tradition established on the beaches of Guadalcanal, in the workshops of Hawaii, and in the waters off Normandy. They build, they fight, and they embody the enduring truth that victory belongs to those who can both destroy their enemies and construct something better in the ruins of what came before.